Hi everyone, it's Laura here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video I'm going to show you how to use layering stamps to create a bright and beautiful hello card. The stamp set I will be using today is the Altenew Build the Flower Snapdragon stamp set. This is a layering stamp set, which means that the images will be layered on top of each other to create the final design. There are two different flowers that you can build, and on the back of the stamp set there is also a layering guide which is very useful in order to build the images. And the stamp set also comes with coordinating dies that will die cut your florals. The Build a Flower stamp sets by Altenew can also be purchased as part of a subscription plan right now, and I'll have more information on the blog post that I will have linked in the description box down below. And the inks I will be using today are also by Altenew and are part of the Spring Bouquet set, which I recently purchased and I had the opportunity to test on this card. For the stamping I will be using my Mini Misty, as I think a stamp positioning tool is very helpful to get a nice and precise alignment of all your layers. And I'm going to start with the lighter layer. This is the more solid image, and again you can use the layering guide that is available with the stamp set to help you with the stamping. I'm going to stamp that with the lightest of the pink inks. This is the baby pink, and I'm going to stamp it a couple of times so that I get a nice and even coverage. I am then going to align the second stamp in the layering series on top of the image I just stamped. And I'm going to stamp that with the next darker ink. This is the fuchsia ink. And you can see that by adding this second layer, we are already building a lot of detail. And again, I'm going to stamp a second time so that I get a bit of a darker color and I have a crisp impression. And then it was time for the third and last layer, which I stamped with the magenta ink by Altenew. And as I said, I purchased these inks because I wanted to try them out and use them with this stamp set. And I have to say that I really love them. They are very bright and super juicy. And I love that you get these sets where you have already the right ink for your layering stamp sets. Next, it was time to stamp the flower stems, and for that I used the medium and the darker greens in the Spring Bouquet ink set by Altenew. So I used first lime to stamp the first layering image. Also in this case I am stamping multiple times so that I get a rich impression. And then for my second and last layer for the flower stem, I used Altenew ink in Fresh Leaf. The paper that I'm using is the Neenah Solar White in the 110 pounds version. And this was my first time trying one of the Altenew layering stamp sets. And I had to say that I had a lot of fun creating this card. It was really fun to see how these flowers came together and how all the details get added by subsequent stamping. And this card was super fast to make, and this stamp set would also be really useful in case you need to produce multiples of each card. And as I said, the stamp set comes with matching dies that die cut your flowers perfectly, and that's another plus for me. Here I am going ahead and stamping the second flower in the set. And for this flower I wanted two versions, so to make my stamping a little bit faster, I took a large enough piece of cardstock. This is again Neenah Solar White 110 pounds cardstock. And every time I stamped my layer, I flipped the cardstock and then I could stamp the layer again on the other side of the cardstock, sort of getting almost a mirrored impression. And this way, with a bit of a faster stamping session, I got two flowers. And if I wanted to, I could do this with multiple sheets of cardstock. So instead of 2, I could have gotten 4, 6, I don't know, as many as I needed, copies of these flowers, as well as of the first one. And this is why I told you that these stamps are really great for mass production as well. Once I was done stamping the flowers, I moved on and did my stamping on the stems. And I'm using those same Altenew inks from the Spring Bouquet stamp set so that my flowers all have the same color. And here I wanted to show you a little trick that I used to position the stem correctly so that when I go ahead and die cut my flowers, I know that they will die cut perfectly. And what I did, as you saw, is I positioned the die on top of the flower and I used the die to align the stem with the rest of the stamped flower. And because I used the die as a guide, once I'm going to die cut the flowers, everything will be positioned correctly and my die cuts will be precise. While I go ahead and finish stamping my Snapdragons, I wanted to let you know that this card is part of a blog hop with giveaways, and the blog hop celebrates the release of this new stamp set by Altenew. So make sure to visit my blog post, which will be linked in the description box down below, for more information about the blog hop and the giveaways. Once I was done stamping the images, I die cut them with the coordinating dies and then I moved on and started creating my background. I just want to create a very simple watercolor background for which I am using my new Altenew watercolors. This is also a recent purchase of mine and I was really excited to try them out. So I have my watercolor cardstock cut at 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I first wet the entire surface with some clean clear water and then I came in with a first layer of color, adding the watercolor pan called Lagoon on the bottom of the paper and the mountain mist on the top of the paper, trying to achieve sort of a gradient effect. I then wanted a bit more intensity on my background, so after having dried it with my heat gun, I came in with a second layer and I added in a little bit of the emerald color at the bottom of the panel. And now I'm trying to blend the colors together, again keeping that gradient from the top to the bottom. But I'm not worrying too much about having a super smooth gradation from the lighter to the darker color, because actually I do want some texture on the background. Once the watercolor was dry, to add a little bit more interest, I created some splatters. I first diluted my Perfect Pearls in the color Perfect Pearl with some water and used a paintbrush to flick some droplets on top. This will add some nice shine to the panel. And then I decided that I wanted to add some white droplets too. This will be opaque, so they won't have that shine that the Perfect Pearls have. And for that I diluted some white acrylic paint on my glass mat and again created the droplets with a paintbrush. And finally I picked up a little bit more of that Lagoon watercolor from the Altenew watercolor set and I created some splatters with that too, first with a larger paintbrush and then with a smaller one, because different size paintbrushes create different size droplets. At this point everything was ready and I could start assembling my card. I decided to layer my watercolor background on some black cardstock and then mount that on my card base. The watercolor panel is cut at 4 by 5 1/4 inches, the black cardstock at 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, and my card base is the standard 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I wanted to create a cluster with my flowers, so I first arranged them and moved them around until I found a placement that I liked. And then I don't have press and seal or anything like that. I know that many crafters use it in the States. I'm not even sure if it's available here in the UK. But anyway, to keep my flowers exactly in the position that I had arranged them in, I used some tiny strips of washi tape so that I could flip them around, put the glue behind the flowers and glue them down in position. And then at this point I could go ahead and remove the washi tape and by using washi tape you're sure that your paper won't peel. I trimmed off any parts that was hanging off of my card front, and then I moved on to the sentiment. I used the Hello Darling sentiment, also part of the Altenew Build the Flower Snapdragon stamp set. I stamped it with VersaMark ink on some black cardstock. I coated that with white embossing powder, and then I melted the embossing powder with my heat gun. I then used my guillotine trimmer to trim a very narrow rectangle around my sentiment. I wanted some contrast between my sentiment and the rest of the card, but I didn't want to have too much black cardstock on my card because I wanted the overall look to stay nice and fresh and colorful. I rounded up the corners of my sentiment label with my We Are Memory Keepers corner chomper, and then I decided to create a white frame around my sentiment to sort of tie it in with the card base. So I glued it to some white cardstock. I trimmed the cardstock until I got just a narrow strip around the sentiment label, and I rounded the corners with my corner chomper again. And then I finished off my card by adding quite a few Nuvo drops. These are in the color Morning Dew and will dry clear, so they will add another nice and fresh touch to the card. And I really love the look of clear drops on floral cards because I think it makes them look so fresh, so delicate, so I almost always add them. And that was my card for today. Don't forget to check out the link in the description box below for more information about the Altenew blog hop and the giveaways. If you liked this video, please let me know in the comments below, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. And I will catch you guys soon with the next one. Ciao!